In the bustling city of Vancouver, where towering buildings touched the clouds and streets buzzed with endless activity, lived a young mother and her precious 8-month-old daughter in a tiny apartment that barely fit their essential belongings. This young mom, who had moved to Canada 5 years ago with big dreams in her heart, now found herself juggling 3 jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. During the day, she worked as a morning shift coffee shop barista, an afternoon office cleaner, and spent her evenings doing data entry from home while her baby slept. Her life was a constant race against time, but her daughter's sweet smile made every exhausting moment worthwhile. Their apartment, though small and worn down, was all they could afford in the expensive city. The walls were thin, the carpet was faded, and the heating system had been broken for weeks. As winter approached and temperatures dropped, their living space became increasingly unbearable, especially during the night. The young mother would wrap her baby in multiple layers of warm clothes and blankets, but still she could see her little one trembling in the cold. The sight broke her heart every single time. She had complained to the building manager countless times, but all she got were empty promises and tomorrow that never came. One particularly cold night, while washing dishes in the kitchen sink, she noticed something peculiar. The area around the sink felt noticeably warmer than the rest of the apartment. Curious, she placed her hand near the pipes under the sink and realized they were radiating a consistent warmth from the old water heater in the basement. That discovery sparked an idea in her mind, but she wasn't sure if it was crazy or brilliant. She spent hours researching safe sleeping temperatures for infants on her phone, reading through parenting forums, and even called her baby's doctor to discuss her concerns about the cold affecting her child's health. The doctor's words echoed in her mind: babies need a consistent, warm environment to sleep safely. Cold temperatures can be dangerous for their developing bodies. Those words kept her awake at night as she watched her daughter shiver in her crib, despite being bundled up in warm clothes. Living in such conditions wasn't just difficult, it was becoming dangerous for her baby. She needed to find a solution, and fast. The warmth from the sink area seemed like a blessing in disguise, but could it possibly be the answer to their problems? As she stood in her kitchen that night, holding her baby close and feeling the steady warmth coming from the sink area, she knew she had to make a decision. Her daughter's health and safety came first, even if it meant thinking outside the box, or in this case, inside the sink. The young mother's eyes filled with tears as she looked around their small apartment. The windows were covered with thick blankets to keep out the draft, and their breath formed small clouds in the cold air. Her daughter's tiny nose was red from the cold, and her little hands felt like ice cubes despite the mittens she wore. She thought about her journey to Canada, about all the sacrifices she had made, and about her dreams of giving her daughter a better life. This wasn't how she had imagined their life would be, but she was determined to find a way through this challenge, just as she had overcome every other obstacle in her path. That night, as the temperature dropped even further and the wind howled outside their window, she made a decision that would soon change not just their lives, but the lives of many others in their community. Little did she know that her desperate solution to keep her baby warm would soon become a story that would touch hearts and spark important conversations about housing conditions in their city. Looking at her sleeping daughter, she whispered a promise. "We'll get through this, my little one. Somehow, we'll find a way to stay warm." The story of their unusual solution was just beginning, and it would soon capture the attention of an entire city, leading to changes that would help many families facing similar struggles. In the quiet of that cold night, as she formulated her plan, she had no idea that her resourcefulness and determination would not only protect her child, but also become a catalyst for change in their community. This was just the beginning of their journey, and the events that would unfold in the coming days would prove that sometimes the most unconventional solutions can lead to the most extraordinary outcomes. The discovery of warmth from the old water heater was like finding a hidden treasure in their freezing apartment. That evening, as the young mother prepared her baby's bath, she noticed something she hadn't paid attention to before. The metal sink, despite the freezing temperatures in their apartment, stayed surprisingly warm to the touch. The ancient water heater in the basement, while inefficient for most purposes, was unknowingly providing them with a constant source of heat through the pipes. She spent hours that night exploring this newfound warmth. While her baby slept bundled up in layers of blankets, she used a thermometer to measure different spots in the kitchen. The area around the sink maintained a steady, comfortable temperature, not too hot, not too cold, but just right for a baby's sensitive body. Her mind raced with possibilities. She remembered her grandmother's stories about how, during tough times in their village, people would come up with creative solutions to everyday problems. Sometimes, her grandmother used to say, "The answer is right in front of you, you just need to look at things differently." The next day, she visited the local library during her lunch break from the coffee shop. She spent every spare minute researching safe sleeping temperatures for babies, proper sleeping positions, and anything else she could find about keeping infants warm and safe during cold weather. The librarian, noticing her concern, helped her find medical journals and pediatric care guides. Back at home, she observed the sink more carefully. It was a deep stainless steel double sink, sturdy and well-maintained despite the apartment's other shortcomings. The steady warmth from the pipes underneath created a pocket of warm air that stayed consistent even when temperatures dropped drastically at night. She called her baby's doctor again, this time with specific questions about temperature ranges and safety considerations. The doctor listened patiently as she explained her observations about the sink's warmth. While surprised by her questions, the doctor provided clear guidelines about safe sleeping temperatures and emphasized the importance of stability in a baby's sleeping environment. That evening, she experimented by placing a thermometer in different spots around the sink area. She meticulously recorded the temperatures every hour, creating a detailed log in her one notebook. The results were eye-opening. While their bedroom temperature dropped to near freezing at night, the sink area maintained a steady, safe warmth. She thought about her options carefully. The space heater she had bought secondhand was expensive to run and unreliable. Their landlord continued to ignore her daily calls about the heating system. Other mothers in the building had resorted to sending their children to stay with relatives, but she had no one to turn to in this new country. While making these observations, she noticed her baby was most comfortable during bath time when the warmth from the sink area created a cozy environment. Her little one would stop shivering and even giggle happily, something that had become rare in their cold apartment. She spent a whole weekend studying the sink's structure, measuring every inch, and thinking about how to make it safe. She visited several stores, looking at different materials that could help create a secure space. The store clerks gave her odd looks as she asked detailed questions about the softness and water resistance of various materials. Other mothers in the building began noticing her frequent trips up and down the stairs with various supplies. One neighbor, who had lived in the building for 20 years, shared stories about how the old water heater had been the building's one reliable feature, even when everything else needed repairs. The young mother's determination grew stronger with each passing day. She knew her solution would need to be temporary, just until the heating was fixed or until she could find a better apartment. But for now, she had to focus on keeping her baby warm and safe through the bitter winter nights. She started drawing plans, measuring dimensions, and listing all the safety features she would need to consider. Every detail mattered, from the cushioning to the ventilation, from the stability to the accessibility. She wasn't just looking for a quick fix, she needed a solution that would keep her baby safe while they endured these difficult circumstances. As she worked on her plan, she documented everything carefully. Something told her that this unusual situation might be important to record, not just for herself, but perhaps for others who might find themselves in similar circumstances. Little did she know how significant her detailed notes would become in the near future. The winter wind continued to howl outside their window, but inside, the young mother felt a glimmer of hope. She had found a potential solution, unconventional as it was. Now she needed to figure out how to make it work safely and effectively. The warmth from the sink had shown her a way forward, and she was determined to make the most of this unexpected blessing. After days of careful planning and preparation, the young mother was ready to put her solution into action. She had transformed the deep kitchen sink into a cozy, secure sleeping space for her baby. The preparation had been meticulous. She'd lined the sink with soft, waterproof padding and created raised edges using specially chosen materials that were both firm and gentle. She had tested everything multiple times. The padding was secured firmly, preventing any movement. The surface was slightly angled, following safe sleep guidelines she'd researched extensively. Most importantly, the temperature remained consistently warm and comfortable thanks to the heat from the pipes below. Before placing her baby in this unusual sleeping space for the first time, she called her pediatrician one last time. She described every detail of her setup, and though the doctor was surprised by her creative solution, they discussed important safety measures. The doctor emphasized monitoring the temperature and ensuring proper air circulation. That first night was filled with both hope and anxiety. The young mother barely slept, checking on her baby every few minutes. But what she saw amazed her. Her little one slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. No more shivering, no more waking up crying from the cold. The baby's cheeks were warm and rosy, not pale and cold like before. She set up a small bed for herself right next to the sink, wanting to stay close to her baby. From this position, she could easily check the temperature and make sure everything was safe throughout the night. She kept detailed notes of her observations, recording sleep patterns and temperature readings every few hours. The transformation in her baby was remarkable. During the day, her little one was more energetic and happier. The peaceful nights of warm sleep made a huge difference in their daily lives. The baby's appetite improved, and those bright, cheerful giggles that had become rare during the cold spell returned. Not wanting to take any chances, the mother developed a routine. Every evening, she would thoroughly clean and sanitize the sink area. She had a checklist of safety measures she would go through, making sure everything was secure and at the right temperature. She even installed a small battery-operated monitor to track humidity and temperature levels. Word began to spread among the other mothers in the building about the unusual but effective solution. At first, some were skeptical, but seeing the positive change in the baby made them curious. The young mother found herself explaining her setup to other parents, showing them her safety measures and sharing her temperature logs. One elderly neighbor, who had raised 3 children in the building, brought her old baby blankets and shared stories of how mothers in her time had also come up with creative solutions during difficult times. These conversations made the young mother feel less alone in her struggles. The baby's doctor visited their apartment to see the setup firsthand. Though unconventional, they admitted that the mother had created a safe, warm environment following all the essential guidelines for infant sleep. The doctor was particularly impressed by the detailed records she kept and her attention to safety measures. As winter progressed, the mother continued to refine her system. She added small touches to make the space even more comfortable, a gentle mobile hum at a safe distance, soft music playing nearby, and a small night light that provided just enough illumination for her nighttime checks. Other residents in the building started calling her the resourceful mom. They were amazed by how she had turned a challenging situation into a workable solution. Some even began documenting their own housing problems, inspired by her detailed record-keeping. The local community center's parenting group heard about her story and invited her to share her experience. Though shy at first, she agreed, hoping her story might help other parents facing similar challenges. She brought her notes, photos of her setup, and temperature logs to show how she ensured her baby's safety. What started as a desperate measure to keep her baby warm had evolved into something more. It became a testament to a mother's ingenuity and determination to protect her child, no matter the circumstances. Her solution, while unusual, demonstrated that sometimes the most unconventional approaches could be exactly what was needed. As she watched her baby sleeping peacefully in the carefully prepared sink space each night, she felt a mix of emotions: pride in finding a solution, anger at the conditions that made it necessary, and hope that their situation would improve. Little did she know that her innovative solution would soon catch the attention of people who could help make real changes in their community. Each night, as the warm air from the pipes created a cozy environment for her baby, she would sit nearby, working on her data entry job or writing in her journal. The sound of her child's peaceful breathing reminded her that sometimes the best solutions come from thinking differently and refusing to give up, no matter how difficult the circumstances might be. The story of the sink solution spread through the apartment building like wildfire. It started with hushed conversations in the hallways, then moved to impromptu gatherings in the laundry room, where residents shared their own struggles with the building's poor conditions. The young mother's innovative approach had opened a floodgate of similar stories. A grandmother from the 3rd floor revealed how she'd been using hot water bottles and layers of blankets to keep her grandchildren warm during their weekend visits. A family of 4 from the 5th floor admitted to all sleeping in one room, hoping their combined body heat would make the cold nights bearable. Each story added to a growing picture of desperate families trying to cope with substandard living conditions. During one of these informal gatherings, a newly arrived tenant who worked as a housing rights advocate listened intently to the stories. She was amazed by the detailed records the young mother had kept: temperature logs, maintenance request copies, dated photographs of frost on interior walls, and medical notes about her baby's health concerns due to the cold. The advocate explained that these documents were more than just records, they were evidence. She helped the residents understand their rights as tenants and showed them how their individual struggles were part of a larger pattern of neglect. The young mother's careful documentation became a template for others to follow. Residents began meeting regularly in the community room, sharing their experiences and supporting each other. They learned that the building's heating problems weren't new. Some tenants had been dealing with them for years. The difference now was that they were finally talking about it openly and collectively. A retired teacher living on the 4th floor started a spreadsheet tracking when and how often each apartment lost heat. A college student created a group chat where residents could update each other about maintenance issues. The building's community, once disconnected, was coming together around their shared challenges. The young mother's sink solution became a symbol of resilience and creativity in the face of hardship. Other parents in the building began visiting her apartment to see the setup for themselves. They were touched by how she'd transformed a basic kitchen sink into a warm, safe haven for her baby. One evening, during a particularly cold spell, a family with young children knocked on her door seeking advice. Their children hadn't slept properly in days due to the cold. The mother spent hours showing them how to document temperatures, file complaints effectively, and create temporary warming solutions that were safe for their situation. The building's maintenance man, who had worked there for decades, finally spoke up during one of the community meetings. He shared his frustration about reporting these issues to the property management company repeatedly, only to have his requests for major repairs ignored or denied. His testimony added another crucial piece to their growing documentation. As winter deepened, the residents organized a support system. They checked on elderly neighbors during cold snaps, shared extra blankets and space heaters, and helped each other document ongoing issues. The young mother's detailed records became a model for the entire building to follow. A nurse living in the building started recording health complaints related to the cold, everything from increased asthma symptoms to respiratory infections. This medical documentation added weight to their growing case against the building's management. The community room, once barely used, became a warm hub where residents could gather during the coldest parts of the day. They brought chairs, blankets, and shared hot drinks while discussing their next steps. The space heaters they pooled together made it the warmest room in the building. People began sharing their skills to help improve conditions. An electrician checked everyone's space heaters for safety. A seamstress taught others how to make draft stoppers for their doors. A student studying law offered to research tenant rights in their spare time. What had started as one mother's desperate solution to keep her baby warm had evolved into a building-wide movement. The residents were no longer just individuals struggling alone. They had become a community supporting each other through a difficult situation. The young mother often reflected on how her simple solution had sparked such significant changes in their building's community. While she still worried about the cold and her baby's welfare, she no longer felt alone in her struggles. Every night, as she settled her baby into the warm, safe sink space, she could hear the hum of community activity throughout the building, people helping people, sharing resources, and working together for change. Little did any of them know that their united efforts and careful documentation were about to catch the attention of people who could help them on an even larger scale. The story of their building's residents and their creative solutions was about to reach far beyond their community, touching hearts and inspiring action in ways they never expected. The story reached local news in an unexpected way. A young reporter, working on a piece about rising heating costs in the city, overheard a conversation at the coffee shop where the young mother worked her morning shift. Customers were discussing this sink baby story, and the reporter's curiosity was immediately sparked. Initially hesitant to share her story with the media, the young mother thought carefully about what it could mean for other families facing similar struggles. After discussing it with her neighbors and the housing advocate, she agreed to an interview, but with one condition: the focus should be on the larger issue of substandard housing conditions, not just her unique solution. The reporter spent several days in the building, documenting not just the young mother's story, but the experiences of all the residents. The detailed records kept by the community proved invaluable. Temperature logs, maintenance request copies, medical records, and photographs painted a vivid picture of their daily struggles. The first news story aired during the evening news. The camera showed the frost-covered windows, the ineffective radiators, and the innovative sink solution, though always careful to protect the baby's privacy. But what truly caught viewers' attention were the interviews with residents, each sharing their own experiences of trying to stay warm in the freezing building. The young mother's voice trembled as she explained on camera how she discovered the warm sink area and turned it into a safe sleeping space for her baby. She showed the reporter her careful preparations, the safety measures, and her detailed temperature monitoring system. Her dedication to her child's safety and well-being shone through in every word. The story quickly went viral on social media. Local news websites were flooded with comments from people sharing similar experiences with negligent landlords. Other media outlets picked up the story, expanding it to explore the broader issues of affordable housing and tenant rights in the city. Housing advocates from across the city began reaching out. They explained how this situation highlighted a growing crisis in rental housing, where many families were forced to live in substandard conditions due to rising rents and limited affordable options. The building's residents found themselves at the center of a citywide conversation about housing rights. Their story resonated with thousands of other tenants who had faced similar challenges but hadn't known how to fight back or make their voices heard. Public health officials took notice as well. They were particularly concerned about the health impacts on young children and elderly residents living in cold conditions. The young mother's careful documentation of her baby's health improvements after finding a warm sleeping solution became part of their investigation. City council members began receiving hundreds of emails and calls about the situation. The story had struck a chord with voters, many of whom had children or grandchildren of their own. The image of a mother resorting to having her baby sleep in a sink just to stay warm became a powerful symbol of the housing crisis. Local universities reached out to study the situation. Researchers were interested in both the health impacts of inadequate heating and the community organizing that had emerged in response. The building's residents shared their experiences, hoping their story could help create change for others. The media attention revealed that similar situations existed in other buildings owned by the same property management company. Other tenants began coming forward with their stories, showing a pattern of neglect that extended far beyond just one building. Throughout all the attention, the young mother remained focused on her primary concern, keeping her baby warm and safe. She continued her careful routine each night, checking temperatures, ensuring safety, and monitoring her child's well-being. The media spotlight hadn't changed her immediate reality, but it had given her hope that change might finally come. The community continued to support each other through the media attention. They helped prepare for interviews, shared their stories thoughtfully, and made sure their message stayed focused on the need for systemic change in housing conditions. As winter continued and temperatures remained bitter, the story kept growing. What had started as one mother's desperate solution had become a catalyst for examining how cities handle housing issues and protect their most vulnerable residents. The sink that had kept one baby warm was now helping to shine a light on a problem affecting thousands of families across the city. The media spotlight finally forced the landlord to address the heating crisis. Early one morning, a fleet of repair trucks pulled up outside the building. Workers began flooding in, carrying tools and equipment, a sight that brought tears of joy to many residents' eyes. The property management company, facing intense public pressure and scrutiny from city officials, had no choice but to take action. Inspectors discovered that the heating system hadn't been properly maintained for years, despite numerous complaints from tenants. The repairs would be extensive, but they were finally happening. The young mother watched from her window as more trucks arrived. Her baby, still sleeping peacefully in the warm sink setup, was unaware of the commotion outside. She felt a mix of emotions, relief that change was finally coming, but also anger that it had taken such extreme measures to get basic repairs done. The city's housing department launched a broader investigation of rental properties throughout the area. They discovered dozens of buildings with similar violations. The young mother's story had opened a floodgate, leading to inspections and mandatory repairs across the city. During the repairs, which would take several weeks, the property management company was required to provide temporary housing for all residents. Many families were moved to nearby hotels, but the young mother chose to stay. She couldn't risk moving her baby from the one warm spot they had found, and her work was within walking distance. The workers were touched by her story. They had seen the news coverage, but meeting her in person and seeing the careful setup she'd created for her baby moved them deeply. They made her apartment their first priority, working quickly to restore heat to her unit. As the repairs progressed, city council members visited the building. They spoke with residents, examined the conditions, and promised new legislation to prevent similar situations in the future. The young mother's detailed records became crucial evidence in drafting these new regulations. The housing advocate who had helped the residents organize was there every day, ensuring the repairs met all requirements. She helped residents document the improvements and made sure the temporary relocations were handled properly. Her presence gave everyone confidence that things would be done right this time. Other landlords in the city took notice. Some began proactively addressing maintenance issues in their buildings, not wanting to face similar public scrutiny. The ripple effect of one mother's sink solution was changing housing conditions across the city. Local businesses and community organizations stepped in to help. They donated warm blankets, space heaters, and other supplies to help residents stay comfortable during the repair process. The community support was overwhelming, showing how deeply the story had touched people's hearts. The young mother continued her careful routine with the sink setup, even as workers installed new heating equipment in her apartment. She wouldn't change anything until she was absolutely certain the new system was working properly. Her baby's safety remained her top priority. During this time, she received countless messages from other parents facing similar challenges. Many asked for advice, shared their own stories, or simply wanted to thank her for bringing attention to this issue. She saved every message, understanding that each one represented another family struggling to stay warm. The repairs revealed other problems that had been ignored for years: poor insulation, drafty windows, outdated electrical systems. The property management company, now under intense scrutiny, was forced to address all these issues, not just the heating. Workers discovered that the old water heater, which had provided warmth through the sink pipes, was actually a fire hazard. Its replacement was prioritized, but not before the young mother's ingenious use of its heat was documented as an example of how desperate conditions force people to find creative solutions. As the weeks passed and repairs continued, the building transformed. New heating units were installed, windows were sealed, and insulation was added. The property management company, attempting to salvage their reputation, went beyond the minimum requirements, making improvements they had resisted for years. The community remained united throughout the process. Residents helped each other navigate the inconveniences of construction, shared updates about the repairs, and continued to support one another. The bonds they had formed during their struggles grew stronger as they watched that building transform. Every night, as the young mother prepared her baby's sink sleeping space, she could hear the sound of hammering and drilling throughout the building. These sounds, though disruptive, were music to her ears. They were the sounds of change, of progress, of problems finally being fixed after being ignored for so long. The story wasn't just about fixing one building anymore. It had become a catalyst for change across the city, forcing people to confront the reality of housing conditions and take action to protect vulnerable residents. What began with one mother's desperate solution to keep her baby warm had grown into a movement for housing justice. As spring approached and the last of the repairs were completed, the young mother finally felt ready to transition her baby back to a regular crib. The apartment was now consistently warm, with new heating units humming efficiently. It was a bittersweet moment when she prepared the sink sleeping space for the last time, taking photos to document this unique chapter in their lives. Her baby, now several months older, had grown and changed during their sink sleeping days. From a shivering infant to a happy, healthy baby, the transformation was remarkable. The pediatrician confirmed that despite the unusual sleeping arrangement, the baby had thrived, meeting all developmental milestones. The experience had changed the young mother too. She had discovered a strength within herself she didn't know existed. The shy coffee shop worker, who once hesitated to complain about the cold, had become a voice for tenant rights in her community. Other residents now sought her advice, and she found herself helping others document their housing issues and advocate for themselves. Local housing organizations invited her to speak at their meetings. She shared her story with other parents, teaching them about tenant rights and the importance of detailed documentation. Her careful record-keeping system became a model for other buildings facing similar challenges. The City Council passed new housing regulations, dubbed the Safe Temperature Act by local media. The legislation required landlords to maintain minimum heating standards and respond to maintenance requests within specific timeframes. The young mother was invited to speak at the signing ceremony, where her story was credited as the catalyst for change. Her former neighbors who had been temporarily relocated during repairs returned to find their building transformed. New windows, proper insulation, and reliable heating made their apartments feel like completely different homes. The community room, once their refuge from the cold, became a space for celebrations and regular gatherings. The housing advocate who had helped them organize still visited regularly. She helped establish a tenant association in the building, ensuring residents would have a strong voice in future maintenance issues. The young mother became the association's first president, using her experience to help others navigate housing challenges. Their story inspired changes beyond their city. Housing advocates in other communities use their experience as an example of how documenting problems and organizing residents could lead to real change. The detailed records she had kept became a template for other tenant groups fighting similar battles. The property management company, seeking to rebuild their reputation, implemented new maintenance policies across all their buildings. They hired additional staff to handle repairs and created a system for tracking and responding to tenant complaints. The changes weren't just on paper. Residents reported genuine improvements in how their concerns were handled. As her baby grew into a toddler, the young mother often reflected on their sync sleeping days. She kept all her documentation, temperature logs, and news clippings in a special box. Someday, she would share these with her child, explaining how their unusual situation had helped create positive change for many families. Other parents in similar situations continued to reach out to her. She always took time to listen to their stories and offer guidance, remembering how alone she had felt before her neighbors came together to support each other. Her phone number became a lifeline for desperate parents seeking advice about housing issues. The community bonds formed during their struggles remained strong. Residents still checked on each other during cold snaps, shared resources, and celebrated victories together. The building had become more than just an apartment complex. It was a true community where people looked out for each other. 1 year after the story first made headlines, local news stations did a follow-up piece. They found a transformed building with happy residents, functioning heating systems, and a strong tenant association. The young mother, interviewed in her warm apartment, shared how the experience had changed her perspective on community action and social change. Her daughter, now walking and talking, showed no signs of having spent her early months sleeping in a kitchen sink. Instead, she was thriving in their improved living conditions, filling their warm apartment with laughter and energy. The mother's innovative solution had not only kept her baby safe during those cold months, but had sparked changes that would protect other children for years to come. The story became a symbol of how one person's creative solution to a desperate situation could lead to lasting change. Housing advocates used it to illustrate the importance of safe, warm housing for families and the power of community organizing to achieve real improvements in living conditions. As the young mother tucked her toddler into a proper bed each night in their now warm apartment, she felt grateful for who. Year after the story first made headlines, local news stations did a follow-up piece. They found a transformed building with happy residents, functioning heating systems, and a strong tenant association. The young mother, interviewed in her warm apartment, shared how the experience had changed her perspective on community action and social change. Her daughter, now walking and talking, showed no signs of having spent her early months sleeping in a kitchen sink. Instead, she was thriving in their improved living conditions, filling their warm apartment with laughter and energy. The mother's innovative solution had not only kept her baby safe during those cold months, but had sparked changes that would protect other children for years to come. The story became a symbol of how one person's creative solution to a desperate situation could lead to lasting change. Housing advocates used it to illustrate the importance of safe, warm housing for families and the power of community organizing to achieve real improvements in living conditions. As the young mother tucked her toddler into a proper bed each night in their now warm apartment, she felt grateful for how their story had unfolded. What began as a desperate measure to keep her baby warm had grown into something much bigger. A movement that had improved lives across their city and inspired changes far beyond their building's walls. Their story had unfolded. What began as a desperate measure to keep her baby warm had grown into something much bigger. A movement that had improved lives across their city and inspired changes far beyond their building's walls.